about that race, boys and girls? Huh?
Hello and welcome to another edition of 3 Wide. This week, the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series is at Daytona International Speedway for the Coke Zero 400, a race where many fans and drivers circled that this could be their chance to dethrone the Big Four drivers. Almost blew up in everyone's face when coming down the stretch it was Martin Truex Jr., Kevin Harvick, and Clint Bowyer in the front four. But then after a wreck-filled night, it came down to our last overtime start where Erik Jones, whose line had a bad start, all deformed, and then Martin Truex Jr. looked like he was going to take the win. But then Casey Kane came up to the lead, but then Truex reeled Casey Kane back in, but then going down the backstretch in a 3-wide pass, Erik Jones went around the top of Casey Kane to pass him, which then Casey Kane slid back in behind Truex, and then they went 2x2 into turn 3. And then on the last lap, coming down the backstretch with the help from the 37 and the 47, Erik Jones went past Martin Truex Jr., and that went on to get him his first career win in the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series. The only word that comes to my mind to describe this race is just nutty. There was a crazy amount of wrecks, and we got a first-time winner in the Cup Series. Now on to my 3 takeaways from the Coke Zero 400. Number 1. Wrecks. Going into the plate tracks at Daytona and Talladega, you expect an abnormal amount of wrecks for a normal race. But this race at Daytona was just a crazy crash fest. Paul Menard got us kicked off with the wrecks tonight, where he went spinning, got airborne, and his hood came undone from the car, just hanging on by a thread, which then they taped back together and sent him back out. And then the big one occurred, our first of many tonight, where Ricky Stenhouse Jr. gave a shove to Brad Keselowski, who then was about to pass William Byron, where William Byron shut the door, and then Keselowski was checking up, and then Stenhouse gave him another shove, and that sent him up into the second lane and collected a crazy amount of cars. Cars involved in this wreck were Chase Elliott, Brad Keselowski, Darrell Wallace Jr., Denny Hamlin, Joey Logano, Kurt Busch, Ryan Blaney, Alex Bowman, Kyle Larson, Clint Bowyer, Daniel Suarez, Austin Dillon, Kevin Harvick, Matt DiBenedetto, and Aric Almirola. Some of these guys kept rolling on for the night. In all, I believe the final car count for that first wreck was about 18 cars. Our next wreck was when Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was side drafting the 18 of Kyle Busch, hooked him that collected William Byron. The other car involved in this wreck was Jamie McMurray. The heavy damage for the most part was contained to just Byron and Kyle Busch. The next caution was when Kyle Larson had something break on his car or he blew a tire, I'm not completely sure right now, which ended up collecting Ricky Stenhouse, sending him spinning around. Stenhouse kept going, but that pretty much took Larson out of it for the night. And then we had a caution when DJ Kennington went spinning around. And our next stop on the caution cruise is when Ricky Stenhouse blew a tire and went spinning around. He would keep going on after this too. One of our final cautions with 4 to go involved Jimmy Johnson, Aric Almirola, Michael McDowell, and Joey Gase. And then our last caution of the evening was when Clint Bowyer was getting pushed by Darrell Wallace Jr., ended up spinning him, which then collected Kevin Harvick, Jimmy Johnson, Ross Chastain, Trevor Bayne, and Brendan Gaughan. Say what you want about this season where there haven't been that many natural cautions, but Daytona came to give you an overhelping amount of them. So remember when we're at a race later in the year and the only cautions were the stage breaks, that Daytona took about 75 cars out of a race. Now on to number 2, little teams that could. Every time we go to Daytona, everyone wonders why some teams just randomly pop up considering they're probably going to wreck a car. But these couple of teams show why small teams show up for these races. AJ Allmendinger finished 3rd, Casey Kane finished 4th, Chris Buescher, AJ's teammate, finished 5th, Ty Dillon finished 6th, Matt DiBenedetto with his second best career finish is 7th, Jeffrey Earnhardt finished 11th, Brendan Gaughan in his sporadic appearances finished 12th, and DJ Kennington finished 13th. For some of these teams, this Daytona appearance and finish could really make the season and can propel them on to bigger and better things down the road. And who knows, maybe one of these teams in a couple of years could be one of the top teams in NASCAR, and we could point back to this Daytona race as the turning point for the team. Now on to number 3. That Jones boy gets his first W. After coming so close to getting his first career win last season at Bristol, driving for Furniture Row Racing in the 77 5-hour energy car, Erik Jones finally gets to the top of the Cup Series mountain and wins at Daytona. After a pretty tough season for most of the top young guns in the sport who have been looked on to carry this sport into the next 10 plus years, even being called out by some tracks for not winning as the reason to why attendance is down, Erik Jones punching through is an overall great thing to see. Now we'll see if Jones and the rest of the young guns can really ride this wave of momentum and make this turnaround happen for this season. Now we'll get into my 3 things to look ahead to next week at Kentucky Speedway for the Quaker State 400. Number 1. Will Eric Jones start clipping off wins? When we hear people talk about the young guns in NASCAR, they say all it takes is one win for them to start riding a huge wave of momentum. Now we'll see if Jones can ride a wave of momentum from Daytona into Kentucky, a track where people thought this would be more suitable for him to get his first career win at than Daytona. And as we know in the past at Kentucky, Joe Gibbs Racing is one of the premier teams at the track when the Cup Series comes to town. And who knows, if Eric Jones can get a win at Kentucky or just have a decent finish, he might be the 4th guy in this race for the championship coming into Homestead. Now on to number 2. Will the Big Four take their spots back? After a nutty Daytona race where we saw even the Starcom cars have a chance to win the race, the Big Four look to take back what they've been rolling with this whole season. So now where we head back to a more traditional NASCAR track, 1.5 miles at Kentucky, where Martin Truex Jr., who's one of the Big Four, is the defending race winner. We'll see which one of them can take their crown back at the top of the mountain. And number 3. What will year 3 of the Kentucky repave produce? The July 2016 race was the first year that this new Kentucky Speedway was used, where they added banking from 14 degrees to 17 degrees, and turn 1 and 2 was used, where turns 3 and 4 stayed at 14 degrees. So now going into this race, I think some people probably think maybe this could be like Chicago, but I feel like people need to get that way out of their mind. This is going to be a standard 1.5 mile race where I feel like the bottom's going to be the only usable lane unless they use that PJ1 or they use the Tire Dragon system. But I'm a bit skeptical with these new tracks such as Kentucky and Texas, where they change the degrees of banking in 2 different corners, how they're going to produce racing. Maybe it's just going to take time for the pavement to wear out and the track surface can produce some great racing down the line. But going into this weekend, I think we're going to see a standard 1.5 mile race where only one groove's really going to do anything. So that'll do it for 3 Wide this week. Leave your thoughts about Daytona and what you're thinking about going into Kentucky in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.